Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight is a 2D metroidvania developed by indie studio Bomb Service and released in 2016 for Microsoft Windows. A year later, the game would be ported to PS4, with ports for Xbox One and Nintendo Switch coming later. Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight is actually the fourth game in the Momodora series, but its story is completely separate to the previous games. Reverie Under the Moonlight was very well received by critics, with many reviews praising the game's combat, boss fights and level design. I was initially drawn to Momodora by its art style and setting, which instantly reminded me of Yharnam from Bloodborne, with its gothic castles and Lovecraftian monsters. In Momodora you play as Kaho, a priestess who is travelling to the city of Karst in order to find a way to stop the corruption that is occurring there. This corruption is turning the city's residents into horrific monsters, and has also started to spread to other cities outside of Karst. On the way to the city, Kaho is attacked by various different creatures. This first area basically serves as the game's tutorial level, where you are taught how to use Kaho's weapons, a bow and arrow and a leaf. Yes, you heard that right, a leaf. Don't ask, I don't have any answers for you. I was actually surprised by how difficult Momodora proved to be so early on in the game. Combat is very unforgiving, and most enemies can finish off Kaho in 2 or 3 strikes. Kaho has a special healing item called a Bellflower that functions almost exactly like the flasks from Dark Souls. Her Bellflowers will only be restocked when she finds and rings one of these bells that are littered throughout the world. These bells essentially serve as the game's checkpoints. Also, just like in a Souls game, checkpoints are few and far between in Momodora, and if you die before reaching one, you will have to replay a large chunk of the area you are currently in. It is genuinely one of the best feelings in the world whenever you find one of these bells and are able to activate a new checkpoint. Just before reaching the city, Kaho encounters the first boss fight of the game, and as you might expect, it's a massive spike in difficulty. It is here where most players will have to get used to dodging and using the bow and arrow if they want to have any hope of defeating this thing. However, if the player is able to best this creature, they will have all the tools necessary to complete the rest of the game. Upon reaching the city of Karst, the game world opens up massively, and there is very little hand-holding from here on out. The player is set free in this massive city, and it is up to them to figure out what to do next. It can initially feel a little bit overwhelming, but thankfully there are plenty of NPCs throughout the city who can give you hints as to where to go next if you ever become stuck. There are also shopkeepers who can sell you powerful items and accessories that will aid you throughout the rest of the game. Despite mostly taking place in a dark and desolate city, there is still a surprising amount of environmental variety throughout Momodora. You'll go from the city streets to a cathedral and even the sewers. Better yet, every area feels distinct from one another, and each of them have their own unique gameplay quirks. For example, while the early areas of the game are more combat focused, some of the later locations, like the sewers, have more of an emphasis on platforming and avoiding traps. Great level design is an essential component of any good metroidvania, and thankfully, Momodora has one of the best designed worlds of any game I've played. Bosses are another highlight of the game. In fact, they might be my favourite aspect of the game overall. They are all brilliantly designed and an absolute treat to fight. Some of them will probably have you tearing your hair out by the time you defeat them, but they are never unfair fights. They just require you to think on your feet a bit more than usual. Defeating bosses will sometimes result in you unlocking a new ability that will allow you to access previously unreachable areas of the map. Unfortunately, these abilities are pretty by the numbers when it comes to metroidvanias. You have your usual double jump, and later on you can dash while in the air. They aren't terribly exciting, and I would have liked to have seen Kaho gain access to a lot more unique and fun abilities instead. Regardless, these abilities serve their purpose, and exploration remains fun for the entire duration of the game. Momodora's soundtrack is simply outstanding, and I find myself listening to many of these tracks over and over again on YouTube to this day. No two songs sound the same in Reverie Under the Moonlight. For example, the track that plays while you are exploring Karst City is very moody and foreboding, which is very different to the track that plays in Whiteleaf Memorial Park, which has a very contemplative and sorrowful feel to it. The absolute highlight of the soundtrack, however, is the track that plays during your fight with Pardoner Fennel. I can't say enough good things about Momodora's soundtrack. It is one of my favourite video game OSTs of all time at this point. Reverie Under the Moonlight surprised me. I didn't expect much going in, but the game ended up being one of my favourite metroidvanias of all time. Everything just works so well. The combat is really fun. The level design is fantastic and actually makes you want to explore the world to find every last secret. The bosses are challenging and well designed, and the soundtrack is simply to die for. If you have any love for this genre at all, you need to give this game a go at some point. You won't regret it.